Good afternoon, and welcome to the RegTech Association's RegTech Edge No Borders program on data, cyber, and information security risks. My name is Nathan. I'm the Partnerships and Member Manager here at the RTA and your host for today's event. In the spirit of reconciliation, the RegTech Association acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and the connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. In acknowledging country, we honour the resilience, wisdom, and innovative spirit of Indigenous communities. We've got a great selection of presentations for you today, but before we jump into it, just a couple of housekeeping items. Today will be recorded, and every registered delegate will receive the link. Please keep your cameras and mics off unless you are presenting. Thank you. We also ask that any and all questions be asked in the chat, and please don't be shy. I'll ask our presenters to jump onto the chat to answer any of those questions directly. We will run a poll towards the end of the event. We would appreciate your input, as these help us with industry trends and the quality of the programs. We still have a number of events to close out 2025, but we're also in full swing planning our activities for 2026. If you're on our mailing list, you'll be the first to receive this information and opportunities. In the next few months, we'll be launching a new website with an enhanced RegTech directory, including better discovery tools and the ability for RegTechs to be featured. We'll also announce our awards program for 2026, featuring an expanded range of awards for RegTechs and regulated institutions, including individual awards such as Entrepreneur of the Year and Women in Tech Awards. So keep an eye out for that. Enough from me. It is now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker for today, Emmanuel Manos Schizas. Manos is the head of regulatory engineering at RegGenome. He is responsible for the development of RegGenome's core information structures, leads a team of expert regulatory analysts and analysts, and supports regulatory engagement and business development. Manos was part of the team that moved to RegGenome when the company was spun out of the University of Cambridge in 2021. Prior to that, he's been a regulator with the UK's Financial Conduct Authority, as well as head of regulatory operations at a London-based RegTech firm. Thank you, Manos. I invite you to the virtual stage.
Thank you very much, Nathan. I'm very, very grateful to be invited to address this group and really looking forward to the presentations later on. I'll just take a moment to share my screen, and you should be able to see the presentation shortly. Let me know in the chat if there are any issues. So we're going to hear from a lot of people who have been innovating in this space later on in today's event. I wanted to start us off with something slightly different. Instead of talking about all the amazing applications that people can bring to the compliance space, I wanted to talk about the foundations of data. And, you know, in the spirit of this being the TikTok and YouTube generation, having to summarize everything in the first 20 seconds, I really hope to impress upon you today just how important, how foundational the importance is of structured data for everything we do, and the continued importance of the data layer. The best way to start is to just ask why we're all here. Like, what's wrong with the way regulators regulate, with the way the rules are done, with the way compliance is done, that we need to go into all these lengths and invest so much money into automating and making it better. And there's two different ways of addressing this question. Now, I think if you're in this sector, you will have seen some variant of this slide many, many times in your lives. So the first way to look at things, to say analog compliance, the way we've done it traditionally, is a burden, or regulation, the way it's been done traditionally, is a burden. In the financial services sector, the one we're closer to, it's the consensus by now that firms just can't keep up by just throwing more analysts, more bodies, more brains, more money at the problem. And there's the usual rundown of numbers on just how much money goes into getting compliance to work. And if you've been on the receiving end of a total addressable market chart, you may have heard the dreaded words, you know, if we can just get 1% of that saving, we're made. And the reality is slightly different. To us at RegGenome, it's really important to look at the issue of kind of digitizing regulation and compliance from a very different perspective, and to look at today's analog regulation as evidence of a missing infrastructure. So the way we tend to think of this is, in any of the sectors that are regulated, every transaction comes with its bundle of accompanying flows of regulatory information and approvals. And you can't digitize anything faster than you can digitize that regulatory and compliance component. And even worse, if you zoom out to the very, very macro level, the extent to which digital regulation can be harmonized or reconciled across borders redirects transactions into these grooves that later become trade and investment corridors. So essentially, the question then becomes, you know, what kind of regulation do you really need for the digital age, and what kind of infrastructure are we missing? Now, to get to that question of what infrastructure we're missing, kind of at the macro level, there's two different ways of looking at regulation and compliance when you're thinking of digitizing. One narrative is that of regulation as content. You take the rules that regulators publish or legislation that legislatures publish, you essentially apply metadata, you tag it, so they can be signposted to the right applications, the right workflows, so it can be related to the right parts within the internal information structure of a firm, essentially putting things into letterboxes just really, really fast and really, really cleverly, and then looping back to all the various oversight functions that need to take a broader view of the organization. A lot of compliance works this way. There is, however, also a part of compliance that can benefit from a treatment of regulation as code, where you can essentially turn regulatory requirements into unambiguous language, series of if-then statements that can be processed by a rule engine, so that things can be, as people tend to say, machine executable, plugging into data repositories to understand the state of the world in order to get the right kind of outcomes. And if you plug these things right, and make sure that the data goes into your rules engines or smart contracts or whatever they're called in different contexts, is validated and is clean and is correctly transformed, then you can get to the point where people on the receiving end in supervision can get a clear sense of risk and of change, and even perhaps deduce all of these things without additional kind of ad hoc data collections. So this way of looking at things can give you a sense of where infrastructure is missing. Like, in a nutshell, the kind of things we can't do very well are, first of all, getting to that step of translating what is written in the law or in the rules into unambiguous language. Regulators and legislators are not in that business. That's not the incentives they have. They want firms to have discretion. They also don't want the liability of just telling people what to do. So that's one area that is still eluding us. There's also a significant gap in infrastructure in relating regulatory content and tasks to different types of taxonomies, to different types of taxonomies of products, functions, etc. Because firms are different, and even within firms, you've got silos that use very different ways of understanding the world, very different information structures. So you're constantly, whether you're a vendor in this sector or whether you're a buyer, you're constantly translating between information structures, or mapping information structures. That introduces an enormous amount of complexity. And in some cases, we can work with standards that simplify this. But in reality, if you've ever been involved in either developing standards or on the receiving end of standards, you'll know that these are it's a long process. It's a almost political process, and it's not kind of assured. And then the final area where infrastructure is still missing and regulators are hard at work there is in being able to extract essentially signals of risk from the masses at this point of information that they are able to extract from firms. So these are the areas that this industry, by and large, is trying to tackle. So, and the thing is, there's no shortage of good ideas and innovative minds and great applications in this sector. You will hear some very good examples coming up later on, but I don't think that's the real deficit we have in the sector. You know, some of you will have seen these stats many times over. There's by now about 1,000 different vendors active in this space you know, even despite the fact that some parts of the industry have consolidated impressively recently, the sector has managed to digest all manner of innovations, first the cloud, then the explosion in machine learning and natural language processing, then the entire wave of innovation around distributed ledger technology and crypto assets, etc., and now all the way to LLM and agentic AIs. But I think the key thing we find, at least when we take a kind of broader look of the sector, is that at the macro level, growth doesn't really come from killer apps, like from this one new development that dominates the sector. It comes from firms internally maturing and building infrastructure, building ontologies, building consensus internally. So it's not really killer apps that are driving, with one exception historically, which I think we all know and love. But you know, in the last 3 years, ever since 3 or 4 years, ever since the first of us started looking at ChatGPT and looking at what it can do, some of these certainties, even in our minds at RegGenome, have been shaken. Some of these areas that we previously thought were serious infrastructure gaps that you couldn't just kind of apply patches to through better and clever applications are areas that actually these new models can address quite well. So the transition from natural language to unambiguous kind of machine readable language is actually something that these new models are not bad at. And the ability to translate, to act as a kind of Rosetta Stone between different taxonomies within the firm or across firms or between the firms and the regulator, that's actually a task that LLMs, for example, show a great deal of promise in. In fact, even as a layperson, you'll find that translation is one of the things that they are very, very good at. So, so I'm getting some messages in the chat.
You're all good. Keep going.
Okay, sorry about that. So, so I guess the promise is there, but before we move into whether there is actually solutions to be found there, I think there is a lingering issue of public infrastructure in the area of data that needs to be addressed, and that goes back to the regulators. Now, I'm going to show my age a little bit by sharing this meme. It is actually 10 years old. And it's a very good description of how regulators act in relation to regulatory content. Now, if you've ever been in the position of having to kind of negotiate licenses or permissions from regulatory publishers, you will notice that absolutely everyone is committed to innovation in this space. Absolutely everyone supports the development of RegTech. But one thing that most of them cannot do is actually make their own content available under any kind of commercial or open data license. In fact, even if you zoom in on GFIN members who are kind of most committed to this area, less than a third of them have any licensing route to their content. And in the past, perhaps that was some guarantee of control and offered some kind of defense against potentially bad actors. But what this is actually doing now is very different. Essentially, it is conceding the front end of all rules to essentially LLM vendors. If you look at all of the research we're seeing about how people use generative AI in the legal sector or the risk management sector, you'll find that they usually, one of the key use cases is to essentially use these models to provide them with a much more user-friendly front end to legal research, to document review, to documentation. Essentially, that means that you can do away with whatever control the regulators thought they had by restricting access to their content. So regulators aren't really gaining very much for the policies they've had to date. They managed to concede the front end while remaining locked in an arms race with all manner of people operating web crawlers around the world. This is an area that we're quite active in educating regulators and helping them kind of progress to digital publishing, but it's one that I really want to raise awareness of, so we can have as many people on our side in helping, helping people realize the urgency of it. But I think we've already mentioned some of the ways in which in the post LLM era, what many people would previously use human labor for or specialist applications for, there appears to be the promise that LLMs and similar models will be able to service. And if you work in this sector, someone will at some point have come up to you and said, has what we're doing been superseded by ChatGPT or any of their peers? And my colleagues, our data scientists, have looked into this question and seen how they could translate that into a genuine research question. Essentially, they're trying to find out, is there any value added by specialist curated data sets and specially curated information structures that can give you better results than a model that essentially has processed half of the internet and has and is able to synthesize language competently as a result. So we've transformed this into a question of, is it possible for a specialist self-hosted small language model that's trained on specialist structured content, regulatory content, to outcompete the leading LLMs in questions of analyzing and classifying regulatory text? Now, there is an entire paper that my colleagues have published in this area. I thoroughly recommend you read it. I can't give you the full summary, but I can give you the most salient points. The quick answer is yes. You can get significantly greater performance through a small language model that's trained on specialist structured data. And I'll explain very practically why that is. So if you look at all of the leading LLMs, one of the things that characterizes them is that they are highly unstable in terms of how they process regulatory information. So they are about 100 times as likely as a self-hosted small language model based using specialist data to produce different answers to the same question in different iterations. And so the problem is that not only do you get kind of inferior performance on average, you also get much more varying performance on top of that. You also what's also really important is if you process documents through a series of agents, you will see the errors compound if you're not using kind of specialist structured data. So we saw an increase in the order of 64 to over 100%, depending on which configuration, which thematic area you were looking at, in moving from an LLM-based kind of processing framework to a small language model. And then all of this translates also to cost. The beauty of dealing with structured data is you're actually dealing with less data, or at least you're dealing with fewer tokens. And so in the test that my own colleagues ran, you ended up with 1/80th of the cost when you're using specialist data, and a much, much smaller kind of energy footprint much smaller demands on human reviewers, and where we tried to scale it up to what that would mean in terms of savings across one entire domain, such as anti-money laundering, for example, in our corpus, the numbers that came out were really quite impressive. The difference between processing everything through an LLM and processing everything through a small language model trained on specialist data came up to the order of $500,000, which, you know, is not small change. Now, I don't know if you remember, and we're coming now to the end of this presentation. Some of you may remember a couple of years back when people launched the Humane AI pin that was meant to replace your phone. Essentially, it was a number of LLMs talking badly to each other. Now, this is the sort of thing you really, really want to try to avoid in compliance. You know, what we found in the research that we did was that without kind of specialist structured data, agents quickly start compounding errors between them. And so we feel that information structures that actually make sure that all the participating kind of systems and agents actually know what they're talking about are crucial. And the way I normally describe this to my own colleague is, as I say on the screen here, if you think vibe coding is bad, vibe compliance is really, really bad. And that's what you end up with if you don't have that foundation of structured data. So I hope in this very, very brief overview, I've really impressed on you the importance of data as a foundation on which everything else is built. And I hope that now allows us to transition to the kind of more optimistic message of, you know, what amazing things innovators can build in this space using both technologies, both old and new. So thank you very, very much for your attention. I really look forward to questions in the comments, and I will respond as best I can.
Thanks, Manos. And yes, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and he will answer as many of them as he can. All right, moving on. We now have 6 presentations for you, all showcasing the diverse range. It's a bit of a bento box of solutions that solve for the various aspects of data, cyber, and info security. A reminder to our presenters that you have 5 minutes, and at the 4-minute 30-second mark, I'll turn my camera on to let you know that it's time to wrap up. First up, we have Graham from 𝗙𝗲𝗴𝘂𝗂𝗏. Graham, the floor is yours, and I'll start your time now. And change the slide.
Thanks, everybody. My name's 𝗙𝗲𝗴𝘂𝗶𝘆. I'm the co-founder of 𝗙𝗲𝗴𝘂𝗏𝘂𝗏. We're a regulatory and compliance in cybersecurity. Next. Now, I'm not going to go through about what we've all seen, how many times we've had to complete ASD8. We call this a bit of a vanity metric because everybody is so obsessed about getting greens over oranges and reds. So we've all completed the questionnaire, and this led us to, for 𝗙𝗲𝗴𝘂𝗏, to create our new solution called Paradigm. Next. Now, Paradigm is taking the standards and regulations globally, and what we did is we created our own universal control framework. Because there was so many frameworks and standards, there was consistent overlap, whether it was ASD8 to NIST to ISO. So what we did is we created our own framework of questions. So when we were answering the questions, we were also answering them across the other sorts of standards. That led us to looking at creating an easy, simple questionnaire that was able to be gathered. But what it did was also enabled us to score. And we just didn't score it on how many questions you had yes, no, or unsure. What we went about was we created controls that are implemented based upon like implemented controls versus benchmark requirements. We looked at the weights of what the right controls on their maturity scores and their weights. But also what we looked at is we blended a formula up that actually looked at their target maturity levels, the actual gap between that. Now, what it's been able to do is that we can actually simplify the scoring of the standards and frameworks. We don't have to build APIs. We can digest the information and we can analyze it through our AI engine. Now, what that's done is it just gives you the questionnaire. We only see that as 5%. And now this leads into our next situation. So next slide, please. What we did is we created Perfect Storm. Perfect Storm is how far we're going down the rabbit hole with this, whether you want the rabbit hole with the red pill or the blue pill. Now, what does that mean? What we actually came up with is we looked at the answers of yes, no, unsure, and we compared them to the CVEs, the common vulnerabilities, and we also looked at them to the known vulnerabilities that have been exploited. In terms of that, we found over 1,400 known vulnerabilities that are exploited. We looked at the combinations of what they were actually doing and how it blended back to the tick the box exercise of the forms that came through in the standards and frameworks. Now, what did that help us with? It helped us look at the attack vectors, the timeline of events, whether it was advanced or sophisticated, real-world examples. We analysed over 100 cases of attacks of what was the playbook that was actually happening. And we created these scenarios. And through the scenarios, we actually started building a desktop sort of approach that you can actually go through. So we looked at it as an email chain, whether it was a DNS, whether it was a sort of problem that people needed to look at. So we actually looked at that and understood what was the blast radius. What we did then is once we got results, we actually fed it back into the attestation engine, which was Paradigm, and looked back at the real score of what it was. So Perfect Storm was kind of like, how long does it actually take for an attack to happen? Some stats that came out of 𝗙𝗲𝗴𝘂𝗋, which is one of the major groups that is actually attacking out there. Last year, it took them 48 minutes to actually design an attack. This year, it's taking 18 minutes to do a scenario test of what the attack surface will look like. It now only takes 2 minutes to design it. So next. So that's the end of it. So it's not just celebrating finishing up with your ASD8 or your checklist. It's actually looking at what those attestations were, what the information is, how it's going to be used. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. Right on time. Next up, we have Fiona from Assuredly.
Hi, everyone. My name is Fiona Long. I'm the CEO and founder of Assuredly. Next. So as Assuredly is a SaaS-based application that allows businesses and their advisors to assess themselves against a range of standards and frameworks. And why they would do that is to be able to get confidence or certainty in our name, Assuredly, in their own and others' abilities to keep their information and assets safe. Next. As founder, I developed the platform 4 years ago to help businesses not only mitigate information security risks and AI risks in their business, but also see how they measure up to different standards and frameworks, and importantly, articulate how they do security with others. Prior to developing the platform, my team and I had spent many years working with companies, helping them implement supply chain assurance programs and answering thousands of security questions, many duplicated, which resulted in duplicate use of resources and shelfware reports. And our software solves these problems. Next. So our customers include IT service providers, MSPs, large banks, consulting firms, and even small businesses, all of which have a range of different stakeholders who want to know, and you can see these in the blue bubbles there. They want to know how you're measuring up, what security controls you have, and what you're doing to mitigate those risks. Our platform enables businesses to deliver valuable outcomes to all stakeholder needs with a minimal amount of work. Next. So the way it works is simple. You complete an assessment of your business against one of a range of standards and frameworks and regulations in our platform with an easy to use, intuitive and pragmatic process. And the platform tells you what your key risks are, how you measure up, and suggests what actions you should take. I'll show you, I thought today I'll just show you a few key features of the platform. Next. So one is our asset register. It's an important part of doing any type of assessment and understanding where you're at is knowing what you're actually assessing. So you can create a centralized view of your assets. We don't intend to replace the CMDB or the ServiceNow, whatever other tools you're using. You can import and export or connect your asset register. But you can focus on, when you're doing an assessment, we want you to be able to focus on the security controls that matter and not be too worried about security, the security controls you have in place for a server that contains only Christmas party photos, depending on what type of Christmas party you have, of course. Next. It's very strange saying next all the time. Once you set up your assessment, we support businesses in assessing their controls or their clients' or suppliers' controls and allowing them to assess their controls in plain English, providing a range of automated findings and maturity scores. And in the background, the platform is automatically mapping the results of your assessment to the many standards, frameworks, and regulations in the information security space and creating a risk register to help you prioritise the actions if you indeed have a lot of gaps in your security program. Next. Well, people are assessing their controls in the platform. They're given practical, plain English guidance on every single thing they're asked about or looking at. We provide them downloadable tools and templates, helping them understand how to actually implement the controls they're being asked to assess. We describe each control, what good looks like. We tell them what an auditor will look for to help them prove the control is in place, and they can attach evidence to their assessment, which helps businesses really get that assurance they need and prevent checkbox activities. Next. During any assessment or at any time, there's a range of different dashboards that allows you to show you how you're measuring up against your standard, where you're at, or multiple standards you can assess at the same time, what your strengths and weaknesses are, and what risks you're likely facing. Next. For larger companies who may perform different assessments throughout the business or across their supply chain, our platform provides an intuitive way of aggregating results so that risk teams and boards can finally see trends in a consistent way. They can maybe set their own benchmarks for certain industries they're working within or identify systemic issues in particular areas. Next. Finally, we have a unique comprehensive report editor, and that allows your business to use the results of that assessment in hundreds of different ways, whether it be reporting to the board the top 3 risks, preparing a report for the incoming auditor, a list of actions for internal teams, or providing a professional security capability report, avoiding one of those lengthy and horrible security questionnaires to potential clients, giving them all the information they need to help build trust in your business. Our reports can be created in minutes with predefined ones, and you can create your own custom ones so you can get consistency across your stakeholders. Next. We would love to hear from you if you're interested in understanding how Assuredly can save your business thousands of hours in assurance activities and make a real difference in how you're managing information and AI risk in your business. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Fiona. Next up, we have Rachel from Castle Point.
Thank you so much. Could you go to our first slide, please?
Yep, can hear you, no problem.
Thank you. Thanks. Have you thought about what is the worst thing that can happen when you get data classification and labeling incorrect? you might have heard about a massive data breach at the UK MOD, where a spreadsheet of names of Afghans who supported the British against the Taliban was exposed at scale, which has resulted in maybe £7 billion of mitigation costs to secretly relocate those people and their families to the UK, on top of putting those 100,000 lives at risk and creating a political crisis. The Telegraph called it the most expensive email in history. But with all the different security software that we have, I think the question is, why is this still happening? The issue is a lot more complex than it seems due to something called the 3 V's. Next slide, please. Our first problem is volume. There's simply too much data. We send hundreds of emails every day and documents, and the volume is just simply overwhelming. Secondly, variety. We manage all kinds of data types, and honestly, none of us really read the policies well enough to know exactly how to label every one of those items and their risks. And finally, velocity. Data changes very quickly, too quickly to keep our labels correct on top of our regular routine work. We often misclassify just because we can't keep up with the rate of change. And the real issue is, even if you can manage the volume and get the accuracy in terms of the variety management, if you can get it all right, the high-risk data in that Afghan spreadsheet that was spilled was actually hidden. The employee couldn't even see it in order to assess its risk properly. He could only see 150 rows, and there were 33,000 rows in the spreadsheet. He could see less than 0.5% of the contents. So how can CastlePoint be your automated defender and take that kind of load off your shoulders? Next slide, please. We solve this in 3 distinctive steps. Firstly, we take up your own classification policy and we train the AI how to apply it to your data, which we then fully index and classify. Second, we recommend why it should be classified that way using explainable AI, which is a transparent and contestable capability. And that means you know and you're sure that it's actually accurate. And then finally, once you're happy, we can apply the label in Purview, for example, and execute. Next slide, please. Then we go further. We can help defend against key breaches while safeguarding privacy and being compliant in a repeatable and scalable way. We can compliantly get rid of risky personal data that you don't need. We can monitor your company use of generative AI, for example, and we can help respond to breaches if they do happen. Next slide, please. Our key customers love us because we're secure. We're deployed entirely within the network with no phoning home to the internet for any of the AI processing. We're invisible to general users, impact-free, fast to deploy, working behind the scenes invisibly. And we're trusted by some of the biggest government and security agencies in the world. Next slide, please. This might play if you hover and click the little button for me. This is a quick preview of some of the capability out of the box in CastlePoint. It's one interface to see and review and publish labels onto any document and email in M365. So for anyone who has content to classify, not just national security, but also internal policy rules that you need to apply. To do it at scale with clear recommendations, you'll need a solution like this one. Next slide, please. This is all why the UK Ministry of Defence, keep going. There we go, has selected CastlePoint as its enterprise AI solution to automate their data labeling across the entirety of ModNet as part of their comprehensive strategy to help manage the risk of future leaks like the Afghan breaches. Next slide, please. Our track record and innovation is exactly why we've been trusted across such a wide range of international government, police, defence, critical industry, financial services, and even education clients since 2018. Next slide, please. CastlePoint helps you actually know all your secrets before somebody else does. If you need a better and more painless way to label all your data, please speak to us about how we can protect you and have a live demo. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Next up, we have Paul from Araya.
Thank you, Nathan. So can everybody hear me?
Yes.
My name is McGee. I'm the CEO of Araya, and I'm very pleased to be presenting here this afternoon. For the next 5 minutes, I'm going to talk about a threat that has moved from science fiction to a daily operational reality, AI-generated deepfake. And given the time limit, I'll focus specifically on voice deepfake attacks as they relate to contact centers. Next slide, please. So Aurelia is a global leader in voice biometrics. Our AI is trusted by large enterprises and government agencies around the world. And today, with the proliferation of customer contact platforms like Amazon Connect and Genesis, this advanced AI protection is accessible to all organizations of any size. Now, whilst voice biometric used to be about customer experience and efficiency, today it's about survival, reducing risk, cutting compliance costs, and most importantly, mitigating AI-generated deepfake attacks. Next slide, please. I could spend more than 5 minutes just talking about how great the risk is and how it's accelerating, but the statistics tracking deepfake instances are staggering. We've seen a 680% rise in deepfake-driven fraud in 1 year. And the reason for this terrific growth is creating a synthetic voice clone used to be difficult, now it's trivial. Not only is it trivial, it's able to be done at scale. Globally, we are on track for a $40 billion generative AI fraud loss by 2027. Next slide, please. So why is this new threat so effective? It's mostly because the attacks are against broken systems. Bad actors target systems that are already fundamentally broken. For decades, we've based security on what you know and what you have. But the what you know, like your mother's maiden name, your passphrase, your secret answers to secret questions, is all dead. It's been breached. It's not just data. It's not just secret data, it's data. It's data that's available to the bad actors. They don't forget it because they've got it available to them in droves. But most people forget what their secrets are. What you have, like your phone, is also compromised. Caller ID can be spoofed easily, and sending more SMS one-time passcodes or authenticator app requests to the device you're already using just proves one thing, that you are using or potentially using the trusted device, not are you the authorized person using that device. Asking a consumer to answer questions or find the authenticator app is just security theatre, and consumers hate it. It's high friction, frustrating, and forces them to share private data that they know is already exposed. The old model is broken, and the only reliable actor of trust left is the third one, who you are. Next slide, please. So this perfect risk, or perfect storm of risk, starts with organizations being attacked by synthetic identities. This is where bad actors create new, but totally fictitious identities. Bad actors are engaged in effective account takeover, deepfake impersonation of existing customers. There's also the call takeover or coercion, where carers are taking over calls that are initially authorized by somebody else, driving mistrust and enabling internal risk. The rogue agent example, within the 5 minutes I've got, could be exploded into a huge series of examples. But work from home agents that are asking people for their PII is a regulatory compliance nightmare. And the spiraling costs of regulatory compliance are an example of what's going wrong with a broken system. Next slide, please. So the use of voice biometrics effectively implemented using multiple processes, such as making sure that you're only enrolling people who are live, not a recording, making sure that the voice that's being enrolled is not a synthetic voice, not a deep fake voice, making sure that the voice that you're enrolling is not on a bad actors list already, or not a duplicate of a person already enrolled in the system. Enrolling securely a voice print for each customer is a critical aspect for using. The next slide, please. So the benefit of having a voice print associated with the identities you're trying to preserve security for is at the start of a call, we can check that the device that's being used using network signals is in fact a trusted device. And by simply asking a question in an IVR, such as, please tell me how I can help you today, allows an organization to be securely verified that they are the authorized person. But very importantly, continuous KYC or continuous verification of that caller throughout the call allows us to make sure that we're only serving authorized people, and checking that that person doesn't swap to be a deep fake or a bad actor allows security. So what's in it for the people and the organisation? Final slide, thank you. It's not just an additional security layer. It's in fact a different way that organisations can interact with their customers with benefit. A true seamless experience built to rebuild trust and privacy, providing real security for consumers, where organisations can dramatically reduce fraud, slash their operational cost, and slash their cost of compliance against insider risk especially. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you, Paul. Next up, we have Bruce from Revealer. Bruce, where are you?
Microphone on.
Microphone on.
Hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good stuff.
The floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Nathan. Good afternoon, everybody. Bruce Wren from Revealer, the CEO. We're very pleased to be here today to talk about data, cyber, and information security. But with our focus really is on the content that you have in your knowledge base, and that's primarily tied up in documents. So we want to introduce you to a fantastic new technology where we have patents pending called digital twin technology. Next slide, please. Okay, so much of our story today is really about trust. If you can't trust the data you have a major information security problem. So our solution is all about delivering a new generation platform that transforms the content sitting in all the silos you have all around these large organizations and turn it into a trusted online knowledge store. Next slide, please. This is very typical of an organization. Silos all over the place. We were in a client yesterday that had over 100 different repositories, and they had sometimes up to 5,000 copies of the same document. It was really what we call organizational chaos. So we talked about all this unstructured data, and you have to go searching for it through SharePoint or Dropbox or wherever it might be. Go for a search and then pull the information back in a PDF format. The world's 10 trillion documents are not online. They're nearly always sitting in native format, in a repository somewhere. And there are duplicates everywhere, and the amount of time wasted looking for information is ridiculous. Next slide, please. So AI is, people talk about AI, but AI is not the quick fix that everyone thinks it is. What you've got is that AI, for instance, has all sorts of problems finding the correct source, particularly if there are all these duplicates. There's fragmented silos, there's duplicate team systems. Generative AI needs clean governed information, and often it doesn't have it. Agentic AI compounds the problems of generative AI. So unless you actually have, unless you clean up your act beforehand, unless you have metadata discipline and a trusted source, if you don't have that, don't deploy AI. It'll just make it worse, not better. Next slide, please. So what we've done here is we don't actually think of a document as a single entity. It may be 500 pages long. We think documents are a series of sections that we really want, and we never really want a whole document. We want a bit of this one and a bit of that one. We have the policy and the procedure and the guide and the handbook and the standard, and we want pieces of them. So this is what the digital twin is all about. We actually create a web-based replica of what you actually have, and then we break it down into all its sections. That's what we call atomization. Once we atomize it there, we have a section of a document with its own address, a URL. And then we can pull information from multiple sources. And then importantly, we can contextualize them with related information. So you link the policy with the procedure with the guide in real time in an online platform, no downloading. So it's a totally transformative way of doing it. In other words, we take what's on the left hand. Next slide, please, actually, Nathan. What you see on the left is a typical Word or PDF document. A minute or two later, it's a living, breathing website where every URL is a click away, and that could be any section of a document. So this is all about instant access to the page of the document you want, wherever it is in your knowledge base. Next slide, please. So where I showed you before all the different silos, what we do with the digital twin is we map the twin to those silos. So the user then comes in via a browser, doesn't know what system it's come from. They just know that in the twin, it's the latest version because we're pointing back to the trusted source. Next slide, please. So effectively, once we've populated your twin, we have now set up the perfect stage. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, that one's right. That one's fine. That's fine. We have the perfect place to have all duplicate-free, content-rich knowledge base. In effect, we've built a small language model for your knowledge base within a company. This is a secure ecosystem. It's free of AI hallucination. It has insights grounded in trusted material, and all the tools you need to categorize, explain, surface the hidden meanings in the documentation and the relationships and the actionable opportunities. Next slide, please. So we'd obviously love to hear from you, either talk to myself or my co-founder, Caroline Trotman. You've got all our details there. And we would love to hear from you because you can see when we work with banks, insurers, government agencies, universities, regulators, it's taken us on a fantastic journey over the last 5 years, and we have won the Swagger Awards. We would love to be working with you on your next project. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bruce. And last but certainly not least, we have 𝗙𝗵𝗂𝗂 from LeapExpert.
Thanks, Nathan. Hi, 𝗙𝗵𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗏𝗂𝗧. I'm actually based in South Australia, and I take care of business development and channels. Next, please. So for LeapExpert, we're addressing challenges around instant messaging and texting. The headline you see is 3.5 billion of fines globally and continuing to grow with fines earlier this year. Most recently, the headline from FCA, the regulator in UK, they actually reviewed 11 banks over a 12-month period, and they found 178 breaches of communication policy using text and WhatsApp. And these breaches occurred across all different grades, with 41% involving individuals at director grade or higher. So still a pervasive problem that's not being solved in the financial services industry. Next, please. Now, more interestingly, closer to Australia and this region, we've seen the government focus on the use of messaging apps for government business used by government employees. So the Information Commissioner earlier this year reported that 22 agencies that they surveyed, 16 permitted messaging apps and text as regular communication tools. 3 actually had no position on whether employees should be texting about work, whether internally or externally. And 3 agencies actually banned the use of texting, although 2 are actually considering allowing it at the current standpoint. Of those 16 agencies, only half of the agencies had any policies or procedures about what to do, what you shouldn't do while you text for work. And actually only 1 agency had even a policy on how to archive essential communication. So there's concerns there, of course, of freedom of information, national archives and records, data privacy, and so forth. Interestingly enough, New South Wales has taken a more proactive approach. So they've classed any communication on text and instant messages as a business record. Now, the recommendation they're asking employees is you should be saving this information. And their recommendation, the first one is screenshot your text message and email yourself of the text message. The second option is to write down the text message into a note and save it to your record. And obviously what we've heard from Rachel and Bruce in terms of classifying this type of data, searching and finding it, I imagine will be quite hard if you're looking for screenshots and notes in your system. Next, please. So our approach at LeapExpert is that texting and messaging should be an everyday business communication platform, just like email, just like Microsoft Teams. We're an enterprise productivity tool where you see on the left-hand side, your employee can use a whole different range of interfaces to access our platform. So the most popular one being obviously Microsoft Teams, which are on here. From Microsoft Teams, we allow you through 𝗙𝗵𝗂𝗧𝗧 to WhatsApp, to WeChat, to SMS your customers, to reach out to your business partners, your suppliers and vendors. And all communications have the same controls and permissions as you would with email. So everything is stored. You can prevent sensitive and confidential information being leaked. And we can scan for cybersecurity issues such as viruses, ransomware, and spyware, which is inherent in a lot of the cases for fraudsters and scammers through these text messaging apps. But the essential part of that, you have a full record and retention of all this business communication. So all the insights between your employees and your customers and your business is captured. It's not held on personal messaging accounts, their own private text. It's available and for everyone in the business. Next, please. So 𝗙𝗵𝗂𝗧𝗧 itself was founded in Asia Pacific. Currently, our headquarters now is moved to New York. We primarily service regulated and non-regulated industries, with financial services being the most popular. Our key verticals really are supported by our partners and our key integrations. So whether we're working with the messaging service providers such as Meta or the telcos itself or the system integrators, we've seen a lot of success there. Some of our recognitions, awards, we've just been named a visionary again for the second year in a row in Gartner's new Magic Quadrant for digital communications governance. We're a 3-time ISV Partner of the Year for Microsoft and many other numerous awards. So next, please. Love to hear from you if you wanted to bring enterprise text messaging and instant messaging to your enterprise, as well as any partners as well, where we could see the value in working together.
Thanks, Chilip. And thank you to all of our presenters from today's session. If you'd like to watch any of these presentations again, keep an eye on your inbox. The recording will be sent out tomorrow. I'm just going to put up a poll on the screen. If you wouldn't mind just punching in a number, this helps us improve our events. With that kind of brings a close to the end of this event. Thank you all for attending our program today. Thank you to our speakers. And if you'd like any introductions to any of the organizations from today's event, feel free to reach out to us and I'm more than happy to put you in touch. Please jump onto our website and register for our other upcoming events. Next month, we have an event on fraud and scams. This will be featuring Jade Richmond, General Manager of the National Anti-Scam Center, who will join a panel discussion with James Roberts from CBA and Robert Harris from FeedSci. Hope to see you there. Thanks again, and take care.